Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Barr, and today it is time for this month's hero study. And I chose to go with probably one of the most popular and well-known superheroes, and specifically in Marvel, and that is Spider-Man, also known as Peter Parker, if we go by his true identity. One thing that I find quite interesting is considering how popular Spider-Man is, there are a lot of people that just are not fans of spiders, period. And this got me really curious and wondering, maybe that's one of the reasons why he is as popular as a hero as he is, because he has almost embodied something that a lot of people are just naturally afraid of. Or maybe there's something about us as a species where we're like, you know what, it'd be kind of nice to have these abilities and traits that are inhuman and even embody these aspects of something that I do fear. During the heyday of Marvel, with the Iron Man movies and Captain America and going into the Infinity Gauntlet saga, I was surprised that one of my nephews was really into Spider-Man. And I honestly didn't get it. Personally, Spider-Man just never was a hero that intrigued me a whole lot. And I probably did ask my nephew why Spider-Man was one of his favorites, and maybe he told me. That was several years ago now, and I've just plumb forgot about it. Considering that I am someone who is a fan more of heroes like Batman and Iron Man, individuals who overcome their problems with their own ingenuity and cunning, and let's face it, for both of them, just a ton of money. I never really did grasp why a character that gets his powers from something that I have an aggressive form of a phobia against, as I jokingly say, I never understood that. I never understood why Spider-Man was such a popular and fan favorite superhero. Then I started doing some research. And while he does have a lot of these heroic traits that people seem to love, he's got superhuman strength and agility, he's got his spidey sense, he is able to cling to walls and ceilings and climb them like a spider can. As I started looking into his character more, and I've seen some Spider-Man movies, they have not been a go-to for me. It has been a journey, we'll say, of seeing what is so relatable about this superhero. Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, is one of those who is another everyman. He is a teenager, and he has a lot of struggles that most teenagers end up wrestling with, about not being accepted, about trying to fit in, just trying to survive these horrific years that we call the teenage years, while trying to maintain friendships and trying to maybe find a romantic partner, trying to fit in, trying to do well academically. He also has a part of his story where he doesn't know who his parents are, or maybe he doesn't know who his parents are. He's an orphan, and he is being raised by his aunt and his uncle. And I suppose I should throw out there, spoiler alert for anyone who is unaware of the backstory of Spider-Man. He experiences great loss with his Uncle Ben. He had the opportunity to stop a burglary, and this burglar kills his uncle. This is where a statement that becomes his guiding light as a superhero from his Uncle Ben really hits home. That with great power comes great responsibility. Peter Parker had the capacity to stop this burglar, and he chose not to because it was a job for the police, not for someone like him. At the time, I believe he was a TV star, and he's like, nope, this is a job for the police. This isn't something for a star to do. And because he was not the most responsible with his powers, his uncle is murdered. And he lives with that grief the rest of his life. There is this trauma that is a part of who he is and how he decides to navigate the world around him. I think for my nephew, one of the things that makes a hero like Spider-Man so popular is how relatable he is. He has to go through a lot of things that many people relate to in their day-to-day lives, especially when we're younger and we're still in school. The peer pressure, the striving to achieve, the wanting to fit in, wanting to make friends, things that I've already mentioned previously in this episode. He pursues all of this. He also has the trial of needing to figure out his superpowers all by himself, especially for someone so young. In fact, it was a common trope back in the days when these characters were just being brought onto the scene that teenage characters were typically sidekicks to another more prominent superhero, like Robin was to Batman. Actually, when I think about the Marvel Universe, I don't really know many Marvel superheroes that were sidekicks before they became heroes. That's kind of how out of this scene I am. In the newer movies, anyways, you do see Iron Man take on more of a mentoring role for Peter Parker, but in the comics and in the earlier movies, he had to figure it out all by himself. He didn't have anyone teach him what it means to be responsible, how to handle this dual life that he was living, where in one he's a costume vigilante and in another one he is still your average teenage boy who needs to keep up with his schoolwork and social obligations and friendships and trying to hide this really big part of his life. I think this is something a lot of people, whether we're young or older, can relate to. It's absolutely something I can relate to. I still struggle with maintaining solid friendships. I've had more friendships leave than I've had any that have stayed. I have had conflict with people who are really close to me. I have felt alone and isolated. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I was invisible. I felt like people didn't want me or like me or want to be around me. And here is a superhero experiencing many of these same things. That's likely one of the things that makes him as popular as he is. Even though he has his superpowers, they don't make his life any easier. In fact, they make it more complicated. one of the things that really stands out to me about Spider-Man as well is, even though he has these incredible powers, he has some character traits that make him even more of a superhero. Because of these experiences in his life with the loss of his uncle, and even these social struggles that he's had, he also is a kind and empathetic and courageous individual. To my understanding, there isn't another hero that refers to himself as the friendly neighborhood name of the superhero. He refers to himself as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I don't see that anywhere else, that he is a friendly neighborhood Batman or Wonder Woman or Captain America, or insert whatever hero you can think of. And when I think about that title that he gives himself, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, we're talking about someone who is looking out for the best interest of those that are just right there in that location. There are some superheroes where their whole focus is to make sure that the world is safe. And here's one, he's just wanting to make sure that the neighborhoods in Queens, in New York City, that they're safe. He's looking out for individuals in kind of a much more local area, just by that title alone. And even with everything that he's gone through, he is courageous and constantly puts himself out there for ridicule and even bodily harm to try and make sure that the people he feels responsible for are safe. How many people do you know of, or maybe even this has happened to you personally, have had their names smeared through the media? This is something that Spider-Man goes through all the time because of J. Jonah Jameson. There's something about Jameson that he just does not like Spider-Man no matter what. He will spin any kind of article or report to put Spider-Man in the worst possible light that he can. I think I read this on the Wikipedia page for Spider-Man, that in some of the earlier comics, a lot of the civilians that he interacted with were just jerks. And yet, he still continues to show up, to protect, to help, to put his life in danger, even though he is not getting any respect from these people that he is trying to help. Talk about being a courageous young man. There is so much more that I can say about Spider-Man as a hero, and it would be a lot easier for me to say it if I had done more research, or I'd even been one of those who read the comics for this hero. One of the things that really stands out to me is Spider-Man is a hero who overcomes incredible personal attacks and even his own trauma in order to become a much better person and hero. If I remember right, for the character of Iron Man, he tends to have a drug problem and maybe even alcohol, unless that was just in the Iron Man 2 movie. He has his own trauma. He has his own struggles with paternal figures and feeling alone and isolated. And yet, we see Peter Parker make a much healthier decision of working through this trauma instead of running away from it. I can't even think of another hero who has the joy is absolutely in quotes there, but has the joy of battling a supervillain who is the father of his best friend. That is a position I don't ever want to be in. I don't ever want to be in a position where I am having to confront, possibly with violence, the parents of someone I love. And he does it. He does it more than once, even. I mean, we're talking the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin is, I want to say, the equivalent of the Joker to Batman. The Green Goblin is the character, or is the villain, that is so synonymous with Spider-Man that he shows up in a lot of issues. I just realized by referring to them as issues, as in issues of a comic book, it almost sounds like I'm referring to the Green Goblin shows up in a lot of issues that Spider-Man needs to process in terms of his trauma and his backstory. What we see, though, is we see someone who works through the pressure, who does a lot of the work in reconciling with his past, especially regarding his Uncle Ben, and takes those words to heart, that with great power comes great responsibility, and he does everything he can to be responsible with this power that he is given. That makes a pretty damn good hero. And someone that a lot of people draw inspiration from. The more I looked into the character of Spider-Man, the more I realized he's a good hero for my nephew to look up to. Though I don't know if Spider-Man is his favorite superhero anymore. He's going through an Undertale kick right now. My nephew probably chose one of the best heroes to look up to. And there are a lot of things that I can learn from him as a character as well. I can really relate to him, especially for someone who's done a lot of his own personal work and working through traumas of his past, in particular his teenage years. Very similar to a lot of things that Spider-Man went through in his comic book stories and his adventures. We see someone who continues to show up, and instead of becoming hardened to the world, maybe even cynical, he continues to show up as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I could be wrong on some of that, because again, I don't know the story that well, and there's stuff that involves symbiotes and Venom, and I think even Carnage is another one. I don't know the whole story, but from what I've seen, Spider-Man, yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. He is someone that there's a reason so many people look up to him. In fact, I want to say that Spider-Man is like the most popular superhero, if not in the US, then I think it was the world in general. There is something about him that people just connect to. And hopefully this cursory glance at Spider-Man as a hero gives you an idea of what it is that makes him so relatable and what makes him so popular. I can definitely see myself taking some of these really awesome qualities that Spider-Man has and apply them to my own personal life. That's going to be it for our hero study for this month, and I don't know who the next one is going to be. I just kind of decide when I get to that recording. And until next week, and until next month when we do the next hero study, live strong for today. Thanks so much for watching or listening to this podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future uploads. If you are interested in working with me, then take a look in the description where you can find my website or a link just to schedule a free 50-minute one-on-one call with me. Looking forward to talking with you soon.